So, yeah, just to speak to that idea that Maggie asked of just a little bit, that's the issue of the discernment is sometimes you don't know if it's your right discernment, because discernment is that practice of seeing things truly as they are, and it can be very difficult when you have had a lot of traumatic experiences that you haven't really moved through. So what I would suggest as a way to practice increasing your discernment, not necessarily depending on it right away, because kind of like how Ray said, like sometimes your intuition is like traumatic based. So it's something that you might not want to trust in a sense, because sometimes your intuition say, I'm going to punch this motherfucker in the face. And you know what I mean? Go with your gut. And if your gut tells you to abuse someone, maybe it's not the best decision. So sometimes, you know, you have to understand that your intuition isn't always trustworthy. The practice is to work on yourself so your intuition gets better. So for myself, I've had that question a lot myself of like, how do I know if I'm really seeing the truth here or if it's just my ego? And what I ask myself is essentially, am I attached to the answer I'm getting? If the answer I'm getting serves me, I'm like, oh, I really want that to be the answer. And then I'll play the mind scenario like, what if that's not the truth and the opposite is? How does it make me feel? And if the opposite makes me feel shitty, I'm like, no, I don't want that. I don't want that answer. And I'm like, okay, so there's an attachment here. So I don't know if I can fully trust this answer, because it turns out my ego really wants that to be the answer. So that's a good practice to do. Like whenever you feel like you have this intuitive response and you're like, oh, my intuition is telling me this, so I'm going to go with it and I'm going to trust it. Ask yourself, what if the opposite was true? Would that harm you? Would that offend you? Would that make you upset? Would that threaten your ego? Would that threaten your attachment? Would that make you afraid? And if the answer is yes, then maybe the answer you're getting isn't fully trustworthy. If I can be indifferent to both scenarios, if I can be indifferent to both answers, then that's when I can truly see the actual truth, when I don't have an attachment to the answer. So the practice of increasing your discernment really always comes back to the practice with the spiritual path in general. And that's letting go of attachments, letting go of fears, letting go of desires. Now, as I say this, I just want to put that preface out there, because a lot of people hear this and they're like, I don't want to let go of my attachments. I love my attachments. But see, the thing is, there's a very big difference between being connected to something and being attached to something. You can be connected to everything and everyone, but not be attached to them. And that's the practice here. The idea is to bring yourself to that space where you can be okay with any outcome. Practice that equanimity. As you practice that equanimity, your discernment will only increase, because you're not somebody who's attached to an outcome. Like, just to give the most basic example, when scientists are hired by a certain corporation to get a certain result, they're going to even subconsciously, unconsciously skew the experiment so they get the result they're paid to get. So you got to take your attachment out of it in order to actually get truth. That's the only way to really get the absolute truth, is when you take your attachment, your fears, and your desires out of the equation. So I just wanted to offer that idea.